Hello everyone, my name is Layla. I have a very ordinary house, or rather, not at all ordinary. As I begin to tell my story, I would be very interested to know from you, your friends, where you live and where you would like to. I will tell you about my old and new home, and the most important thing that I realized is the value of what we have. In general, watch, listen, do not forget to like the video, and subscribe to the channel. I promise you'll be surprised. My mom and dad and I used to live in a small house in one of the provincial towns. Everything was like everyone else. My parents worked, my earnings were small, and I was very angry about it. Yes, I did not like my house because it was not as big and beautiful as some people's. We did not have a car, a dog, and in general, we had to save a lot of money. As my father said, there is no stable income in our family because my father worked wherever he had to, and my mother was a waitress, then a cleaner, then something else. I knew they were doing everything they could, but I wanted better conditions. I remember one night, I didn't want to go to bed because I was disgusted with my bed. We slept on the floor, on mattresses, and we had only one room. I was very angry at something or someone. My mother asked me what I wanted, and I told her so viciously that I wanted to get out of our house. She tried to calm me down, but I didn't want to. The anger only grew. My mother scolded me because of my behavior. Then my father got involved and they had a quarrel. They swore so loudly that I covered my ears. And then my father left. He couldn't stand the way we fought and left, finding it easier to pull out. My mother was crying bitterly, and so was I. The next day, the landlady came to us. She asked for rent money, but we had none. My mother talked to her for a long time about something, but the hostess was very angry. She collected our things and put them out on the street. My mother and I were left without a roof over our heads. It rained hard that night, and I was so cold that I asked my mother to go back to the flat, and she told me we couldn't. At that moment, I wished I hadn't said I wanted to get out of there the night before. We wandered around the city for a long time with our things in our hands. I kept asking where my father was, but my mother blurted out that she didn't want to see him ever again. I hated him for leaving us at such a moment. I promised myself that when I grew up, I would find him and tell him what I thought about him to his face. We were outside for a few hours, and then my mom took my hand and we walked into a building. I didn't know where it was. It looked like a house on the outside and offices on the inside. Only then did I realize that this was where my mother worked, where she washed the floors. She somehow went through security there and we ran into the toilet. It was warm and dry, just the thing. My mother locked the toilet door and spread out the bags and blanket we had with us on the floor. She sat down there and took me in her arms, covering me with her jacket. I remember how hungry I was. I asked my mother to get food, but she just cried. Out of frustration, I fell asleep on her shoulder. I don't know how long we slept, but we were awakened by a knock on the door. Mom quickly picked me up, packed our things, and hid me in the toilet stall, where I sat on the toilet, sleepy and still hungry. Someone came in, my mother greeted her, and said that she was cleaning up. Then she shooed the woman out, closed the door again, and let me out. We had to leave everything in the storage room next to the toilet. Mom cleaned up quickly, and then I went down the street with her. She bought me a bun and tea, and she only got to drink water. Then we went back to the toilet, and my mother put me back on the toilet and asked me to sit quietly. I sat there alone for a long time. I was bored and scared. I did not know where my mother was and when she would come back. Some people came in, pulled the handle, and I sat and was silent. My mother wrote a sign, "Not working," so that no one would scare me anymore. I thought Mom was going to come back and we were going to look for a house, but that didn't happen. My mother would come to me during breaks and then go on to work. Day after day, we lived like this, sleeping on the toilet floor, and then I waited for my mother all day, sitting in the stall. My mother gave me a coloring book, a book and pencils, made a kind of table, and the toilet served as a chair. And so I sat all day, drawing and looking at pictures. I asked my mother how long we would still live in the toilet, but my mother sadly replied that she did not know yet. I could hear different women talking, the sounds of them going to the bathroom, someone smoking, and the smell of cigarettes stung my nose, and I wanted to cough, but I held back, and once I couldn't, and coughed. The woman was very scared. She asked, "Who's there?" But I was quiet again. I was afraid that they would find me and throw me out. That woman climbed on the toilet and looked at me from above. and what she saw shocked her. She opened the door and pulled me out, asking where my mother was and what my name was. I told her like it was. I was still scared. At that moment, another woman came in. It was the director of the company. As it turned out, she was like, "Whose baby is this and what is she doing here?" And then she saw our stuff. She immediately called my mom and they had a long conversation. That woman was screaming violently, saying that this was unacceptable. Then she kicked us out on the street, and my mother got fired from work. My mother was very upset. She packed our things, took me, and left the building. We were again without a home. But I'm even used to living in the toilet. It's better than the cold street. By the way, the weather then turned bad again, only this time it was snowing. My mother didn't know where to go, so we just kept walking. Suddenly, a car drove up to us. It turned out that it was the woman who found me in the toilet. She called us to get in the car and we got in. She drove us to a cafe and ordered so much food that my eyes almost popped out of their sockets. I hadn't eaten so well in a long time, but my mother didn't touch much of anything. Briefly, I heard the woman apologize for what happened, and she said that she did not want my mother to be fired and feels guilty about it. She asked my mother about our situation, and my mother told her everything as it was. We lived in the toilet for about a month. My father never came back and did not even call, did not try to find us. The strange lady looked at me sympathetically and kept pushing food and tea closer to me. I ate like it was the first time. And then she offered Mom something. She said she needed a housekeeper. "You and your daughter can live in my house, eat. I will give you a separate room and you will no longer have to live on the streets. I want to help you," she said. Mom immediately agreed. They wrapped up all the food I hadn't finished and we got back in the car with the lady. We were on the road for at least 1.5 hours. That lady lived far away, but then a gorgeous view opened up in front of us. A huge mansion, such as that I'd only seen on TV. We went into the house and she introduced us to another servant. The lady gave us a room. As promised, there was a large bed, a table. It was light, warm, and cozy. I immediately jumped on the bed and I wanted to sleep. My mother thanked the woman and then lay down next to me. We had a private bathroom. We bathed in normal conditions, changed our clothes, and went to bed. It was the best night of my life, in my bed with a full stomach. From that day on, we stayed there. My mother worked there as a servant, cooked, cleaned, received a salary, and we also lived there. I loved our new room and couldn't believe it had happened like this. The hostess often spoiled me. She had no children of her own, and she brought me gifts and sweets every day. She communicated well with my mother, and my mother thanked her every day. In general, finally, our life has improved. As for my father, I'm not sorry now that he left us then. After all, then we would not have got into this house and would not have met this kind hostess. I understand that everything happens for a reason. I'm just glad I don't have to hear anyone go to the bathroom anymore. That's the story, guys. Support us with likes and write your opinion in the comments. I will be very happy to read it.
Hi everyone, my name is John, and I recently turned 18 years old. I want to share my story with you and advise you to be very careful about your things, especially gifts, especially from your parents. They pay attention to the dreams and desires of children, and their gifts in life become the most valuable. Since childhood, I dreamed of becoming a photographer. Always took pictures everywhere on the phone. I was the operator of all family events. Even for the school fall ball, I was the photographer. Everyone was happy with my work, and my parents were proud that I had such a passion. After all, my dream in the future was to become a photographer. It was my birthday. As happy as most of my friends on their 18th birthday, they gave expensive gifts. But they didn't expect that my gift would be so expensive for me. On the morning of this day, my parents gave me a camera of the latest model. I was shocked because I knew that it was expensive, and we could not afford it. As it turned out, it was issued as a loan for which you need to pay for more than 1 month. There was no limit to my joy. The world seemed so bright, and every object in the house demanded to be photographed. The first photo was shared, where I sat happily with Dad and Mom. I photographed everything that moved and didn't move. My dream had come true, and I had already started making plans for the future. As I traveled around the world shooting the beauty of the earth, I saw the big earnings that were necessary for my parents. From that moment on, I never left my camera for a day. My class and I took 1,000 photos, and I was very happy with myself, as were my classmates. Summer was approaching, and we decided to go out into nature. I was dreamily thinking about how many cool photos I would take. There were a lot of ideas for both photography and video shooting. This day came as I now remember the worst day of my entire life. The day was in shit, in the literal sense of the word. The morning started with the fact that I overslept and almost missed the bus. I didn't even have time to do anything. I skipped breakfast, didn't feed the dog, just grabbed my bag and ran. But the mood was quickly lifted by anticipation. Nature turned out to be far away. We drove for a long time and decided to stop for 10 minutes to get some fresh air and take a couple of pictures. I really wanted to go to the toilet because I didn't have time to go in the morning. The guys were already going to take pictures against the backdrop of the mountains, and I decided to run quickly to the toilet. On the way, I remembered that I had a camera hanging around my neck, and I would have liked to leave it, but my mind switched, deciding it wasn't a problem. I went to the toilet. I don't know what the hell bit me, and where the curiosity to look inside the toilet came from, as my cap suddenly started to slip off my head and fall. Oh no, I need a cap to protect me from the sun. I scolded myself, because I didn't like to lose my things, especially so ridiculously. Deciding, I didn't know why, to see where it is, I bent my head so low that I did not notice how the camera began to repeat the movements of the cap. I was terrified. This is my most valuable thing. I couldn't help it. I don't know why, either from fright or nerves, my body seemed to be paralyzed, and I just watched the camera fall down. I was terrified, panicked. The first thing that came to mind was to find a branch and pull it out, no matter what state it was in. At that time, I could not understand what was more important than the events that were recorded or that it was a gift from my parents. Fortunately, there were many trees nearby, and it was very easy to get a branch. Right in the toilet, I had to lie down and try to grab the camera tape with a branch. It was not so easy. The branch was a little short, but I had a little more time to dip into the hole. And here comes the tape. I kind of see the camera suddenly, not calculating the weight of its own weight, it found itself right in the shit. I was so tense that this camera literally pulled me down. There was a very sticky, unpleasant substance that hindered my movement. I struggled, almost shouted, and made strange noises. It didn't work out. It wouldn't have worked out. I tried to calm down and figure out how to get out as quickly as possible before anyone noticed. Yes, I didn't even think about how I would look from the outside and how I would stink, and whether I would be able to get rid of the stench at all. How I wanted it to be a dream at that moment. I cursed the first cap, then the camera, for considering them the most valuable. The realization that life is most valuable came only when fate decided to show me in practice. I put aside my thoughts. Well, I don't want to be stuck in shit. So I see a 1.5 meter distance to the light. I had a plan A and plan B. Plan A is to climb the walls to the outside. Plan B is to call for help. But plan B had bad and shameful consequences. I went with plan A. First, I felt for the camera. Then I found a bump that I could lean on, but getting out of this mess was not so easy. An extra 10 kilos grabbed me and dragged me down. I tried to get out every time, again and again, knowing that nothing would come of it. It's like the pressing keys when a computer freezes. You just click each time hoping that a miracle will happen and the computer will work. Suddenly, I thought I heard the voices of my classmates. To be honest, I already didn't care if they were laughing at me. The most important thing was to get out as soon as possible. I tried to jump one last time with all my strength, but I was inside again. There was even a sound. My classmates started laughing about whether I had drowned in the toilet. I was very ashamed, but I could not stay here all my life. I screamed when a classmate knocked on the toilet, not understanding what was happening. Their voices changed from happy to anxious. I looked up and saw 4 of them looking at me. It seemed that they were so close. I am so weak that I couldn't get out on my own. I cursed myself. The situation couldn't be worse. The boys brought some big branches, and I grabbed them. They pulled, and I just had to hold the camera tight and keep cursing myself. As soon as they pulled us out, we were all just silent, and they could see from my face that I wasn't laughing right now. Fortunately, there was a river nearby, and I was able to wash myself, and my classmates even put together a replacement. Someone borrowed trousers, someone just gave me a jacket. I was grateful to them, if only because they didn't laugh at me. After a long time, we decided to set up camp right here as a team. In the evening of that day, we were already laughing about everything that had happened sitting by the fire. By the way, fortunately, the camera was not damaged, and everything that was filmed was preserved. That day I realized that it was better to be extra safe and leave the camera than get stuck in the mud, and most importantly, real friends will pull you out of any dirt.